Okay, so this evening we are going to fly the 737, the Boeing 737 in X-Plane 11.5 from Stansted Airport on the outside of London over to Manchester, which is a bit further north in England. So it's not a very long flight, so it's decent for a YouTube video. And I'm going to take the airplane from cold and dark on the ground. I'm going to try and remember everything without having a printed checklist in front of me, which is going to make me probably a bit more thorough about going around things. I've already kind of scouted out the route on Little Nav Map, but I'm not going to be looking in Little Nav Map while we're flying. I'll try and do everything by looking at the displays in the aircraft. So, we get inside the aircraft, and the first thing we're going to do when we get in, actually the first thing we do, is one of the things we might check, is that the parking brake is on, bizarrely, and that the trim is somewhere near the middle. And obviously in the real checklist there's tons of things you go and make sure they're in the off positions, but I just know they will be because nobody's sat in the plane before, because it's a pretend aeroplane, it's in a simulator. So we can see here that if we zoom in, way up, if we zoom in, ground power is available. In other words, we're already connected to the ground, which is actually a bit of a discrepancy, because if we look on this tablet, we can go into ground services and we can say we want GPU connected. This actually is the reverse. So in the this is the ZiboMod 737, by the way. It has this wonderful tablet that gives us all kinds of toys to play with. So if we go and look overhead, we can see ground power is available. So before we do that, we're going to turn the batteries on. So batteries to on, but then we'll use ground power anyway. And you can see lots of lights have come on, lots of warning lights here and there. So we're going to turn the yaw dampers on. Is it going to let us yet? Not yet. Okay, so it's not going to let us do that until we've got full power from the rest of the systems. First things first then. We will turn the APU on. So we switch the APU to on. And we can see the needle climbing. While we're waiting for that to come up to speed, we're going to turn this knob up here to heading STS. We're going to switch both of these to nav. They will say on DC and then they will say align in each case. There goes align. So this is the initial navigation system. And it says align, so the status setting up here tells us how long until it's initialized. So we've got 8 minutes, so we can be busy putting our flight plan in and getting the rest of the airplane ready while we're waiting for that. We don't need to worry too much about it. Okay, so we come down. This is the overhead panel above the pilots. Let's have a look through each thing. So we want to turn on the window heats. We want to turn on the probes. We want to turn on the hydraulic pumps. You can see it's showing low pressure for the hydraulic pumps on the engines because the engines aren't running yet. We want to arm the emergency exit lights and close the lid on that. The same goes for the battery lid. We want to preset the flight altitude. Now we're only going to climb to 18,000 feet. It's going to be almost a straight up and straight down kind of flight. This pre-arms the air conditioning system inside the aircraft. So APU should now be on, which we get 3 green lights, 3 blue lights here, which means the APU is on. So we turn on the APU bleed, and that provides the high pressure air to spin the engines up. Now we have APU. I wonder if it'll let us. Yeah, it lets us have the yaw damper now. Now we've got the APU up and running. We can put the fasten seat belts to auto. We can change some of these brightnesses so we get to see things. This is going to be a fairly dark flight. It's kind of the sun is going down as we're sorting all this out. It's not particularly cold outside, so I don't need wing anti-ice. What are we doing? Fuel pumps. Turn them on. Let's go and check actually. I'm not sure what fuel we've got. Edit, weight and balance. So we're going to give it fuel just in the main tanks, but not in the center tank. We only need an hour's worth of flight time. So I applied the changes. That's equivalent of filling the plane up with fuel. So we don't need to turn the central fuel pumps on, only the wing fuel pumps. Does that make sense? We can have the logo on. We can have anti-collision lights on. We'll turn the wing lights on.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
Wheel well on. No, we don't need a wheel well on. You turn the lights on really for the...
Okay, the cabin is secured. Have a good flight.
Okay, thank you very much. What else can we do? We're going to go and turn on... Well, we're not going to turn the engines on just yet, but we are going to go into the FMC and go to for position initialization. Go next page. Grab the longitude, latitude, and put it into the buffer. Go back to the previous page and insert it into the IRS position. The reference airport we can put in as well, EGSS for Stansted. I'm not sure what gate number we're at, but it's not a required field, so we can leave it. We're going to go into the route. Origin is EGSS. Oops, it's already in the buffer. I always forget that. The reference airport gets carried through automatically. So we're going from EGSS to EGCC, which is Manchester. So put that into the destination. Make up a flight number. So what should we call this? It's me, isn't it? So JB 123. It really doesn't matter. Performance initialization. So we need the gross weight. So if we come back over to this tablet, we can look in fuel weight and balance and payload. Our gross weight is 109.8 thousand pounds. So if I come back across to the FMC, it's 109.8. Okay. Reserves is how much fuel I want left over at the end. I'll put 5 cost index, which is how much performance do I want from the engines. I can put 20. Again, you can look all these numbers up to see what they really mean. I want flight level 180, which is 18,000 feet for my cruise altitude, and I can execute that. Go to N1 limit, and I can leave all that alone. Go to takeoff. I can put in 5 degrees for my flaps for takeoff, and that calculates the rotate speeds for me. And we're pretty much there. If I now go into the route page, I can go into Origin. Oops, sorry, not the route page, the legs page. Or it's, sorry, on the FMC on a Boeing, it's in the departure and arrival page. So departing, I want to depart from runway 22. And I want to use standard instrument departure BKY5R, which is that one. Activate it. Execute. And for the arrival into EGCC, I just want to pick the ILS for runway 23 right. So you can see it's not here on this page, so ILS for 23 right, there it is. I'm not going to use a star. Execute that. So if we go and look in legs now, we can see lots of information now, and we've got a discontinuity between the start of our flight and the end of our flight. So I'm going to insert a waypoint in here. So I'm going to go to Banto. I'm going to set several waypoints actually. Banto. Execute. And then on top of this one I'm going to insert TNT. TNT into there. And it's asking me which one I mean. And it's obviously going to be is closest first in the Boeing, it shows you. So we'll choose that one. And execute. And go next page. And then finally we want to go to Bolby. B-O-L-B-I. And execute. So that should give us a nice flight plan. So if we have a look up here, this hasn't quite come up to speed yet. And if we go and look overhead, we can see, go further overhead, 1 minute to go on the inertial guidance. So while we're waiting for that, it's warning us now the IRS system isn't up to speed yet and the electric isn't being generated properly yet. Because of, we need to, something I've forgotten, we need to transfer this to APU. So the inner two. So we've transferred electrical power to the APU generator. As soon as we get the engines running, we'll transfer to the outer switches here, which is like saying use the electric from the engines. We have to do that before we shut the APU down, but after we have started the engines, if that makes any sense. Just trying to think. We can put all these onto auto. So that's the packs for the air conditioning. What the packs do is to obviously turn hot air into cold air and cold air into hot air. So it's the clever bit about the climate control inside the aeroplane. Where are we? So we'll get rid of that master caution for the moment. It's just moaning about electricity because we still haven't got the engines running. So we can do our pushback. So you can see the inertial guidance has now come up, so the GPS is working. We want to go, actually in the Zibo we don't have to use the plug-in menu. We can go to home, we can go to ground services, go to better pushback and pre-plan our pushback. So knowing where we are on the airfield, I want to delete the segment I've already got. And I will delete. I want to be pushed back to here.
Ground to cockpit. Plan acknowledge. Call me through the menu when you're ready.
And I will. I will say request the
Ground to
pushback.
cockpit. Tow is driving up.
So you can see it's already getting dark outside. So we probably need to think about turning our taxi lights on. We could also greet the passengers while we're waiting for the tow truck, so we can get the PA system and do the welcome from the captain.
Good morning, folks, from the flight deck. Get your captain for the ride. It looks like it should be pretty good. So we're planning on a smooth ride. Get you there as soon as we can, as safe as we can. We'll talk to you once we get airborne. Welcome aboard.
Okay, so we can start thinking about doing some of the autopilot configuration while we are waiting for the tow truck. So we will turn the flight directors on. We're taking off runway 23, so that's runway 22,
okay,
sorry.
All doors and hatches are closed, ready to connect.
We'll set the initial speed for takeoff to 220 knots for the climb out. We will set the initial altitude to 3,000 feet. We need to find out the QNH for the departure airport. So I can come into here, I can go to Avitab, I can go to airport lookup. I can put in EGSS. And if I scroll down, there's no weather information available, that's rather annoying.
Tow connected and bypass pin inserted. Release parking brake.
Okay, so they want the parking brake released, and that's done, and so we should start.
Starting pushback, and you may start engines.
Okay, so you can see, Hopefully, yep, we're being pushed back. So the first thing we're going to do is turn on engine number 2. So we turn this to GRD. And then we interesting, why have I getting no... Have I done the APU bleed? I have. I wonder if it's because the packs are on and they shouldn't be yet. Because the packs will take pressure away. Yes, that's why. So there's a lesson for you. Don't turn the packs on before you start the engines, because you're going to take the pressure away that's required to spin the engines up. So you can see we're waiting for that number to get to 25, and then we can advance the throttle to idle for engine number 2, which we now do. And you'll start to hear the engines coming up to speed outside. So we'll wait for that engine to settle down. You can see the exhaust gas temperature is climbing. So you've got the N2 speed down here as a percentage of nominal, so that's the gas turbine. N1 is the turbofan. Sorry, N1's there, yep. So that's stabilised. Now we go for engine number 1.
Operation complete. Set parking brake.
And we wait for this to come to 25. We release, or we set the parking brake so they can release outside. Waiting for engine number 1 to come up to speed. Up to speed, and we increase the throttles to idle for engine number 1, and you can see now N2, the gas turbine, is coming up to speed. Exhaust gas temperature is raising. We can send a disconnect signal out of the window. Wait for the engine to come up to speed, and when it has done, so if we look outside, we should see the truck in a moment. If I lean forwards, can we see him?
Cell is disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal on the right. We'll see you next time and have a safe flight.
So we just have a look over the nose to see the truck. There he goes. That's the tractor. He'll stand alongside and wave at us in a moment. Where did we get to? So engines are up and running, so we can go back overhead. And we can switch over to engines providing the electricity. So outside switches here. We are now getting the electricity generated by the engines. So we can switch off the APU bleed, and we can switch off the APU. Does that make sense? Okay, pretty much there. I'm just checking fuel pumps are on. Taxi lights are on. Both of these switches have come back to auto after being at GRD. We can turn the strobes to off. We've got logo on, anti-collision lights on, wing lights should now go off, I guess. Wheel well lights are off. The pressurization system for the inside of the aircraft is set for 18,000 feet. We can now turn the packs to auto, otherwise we run the risk of freezing the passengers to death. Okay. Next thing we will do is go and look around here and go and turn on the TCAS system, which is over here. Okay, at this point you would be talking to air traffic control, sorry, not air traffic control, the tower. So we're going to release the parking brake, which I've just done with the joystick, advance the throttles ever so slightly, and start taxiing. While we're taxiing, we can, if we watch this dial here, this is the flap position. We're going to take the flap straight to 5 degrees. I'm not doing bad from memory, am I? Usually I have a printed sheet if I'm going from cold and dark. Just shows it can be done. Something that I haven't done, which I ought to do, is go and turn on the various lights around the cabin. So we'll turn the brightness up on some of these. There's a dome light above us as well, which we could switch on. We'll put it on to, yeah, dim. Oh, not, we don't want it bright, we want it dim. Ah! Why is it you can never switch things when you want them to? There you go. Sometimes at the angles you're trying to hit things, it can be quite challenging. Oh, Stansted looks quite pretty at night, doesn't it? Or at twilight, I should say. Okay, so we will follow the taxiway around. We can follow this line out to the runway. I'm going to go for the next one. We don't need the full runway to take off. It's a bit madness kind of cutting in that early to the runway. Normally all these are only used when the airport's really busy and you might have different aircraft joining the runway at different points. I've got no AI aircraft being simulated, so there's going to be nothing in our way. We've just got static aircraft being drawn in on the ground. So again, in the real world, you would hold short at these lines and wait for clearance to take off. You'd first be given clearance to align yourself on the runway, and then you would be given clearance to take off. Obviously, we're not using air traffic control, so none of that's just happening. So, go straight out onto the runway. Using nose wheel steering with the tiller. By the way, I'm not using the rudder to steer. Okay, and we accelerate. Full throttle. You will notice that the engine gauges will go to... Oh, I need to get the hold of the rudder. There's a bit of a side wind. You will notice the engine gauges go to beyond 100%, so it's asking us to rotate straight away, so we're up. And about 15-degree climb out. Flaps back to 1. 737's accelerating incredibly hard, so gear is travelling up.
1,000.
Okay, so we go and engage the autopilot.
1,000 to go.
LNAV. So we're at 3,000 feet already, or coming up to it. And I've gone too fast actually. We're going to increase the automatic throttle to 250. We oversped by 20 knots there. And we're flying the standard instrument departure now. So I can set the throttle to... So we've got auto throttle is armed. We're in speed mode to 250 knots. So we stay at 250 knots. Now we have to get to, if we go and look down here, we need to get to D358C before we can climb. So we've got a little way to go on the standard instrument departure. So the plane is turning. So we put the, there's not going to be any terrain as such to see out here because it's very flat, this part of the world, but I'll turn the terrain radar on. It should come online momentarily. You would hope it would. You can see the world going past outside. These little dots are a representation of the boundary of the TCAS system. To be honest, I prefer flying these big jets because there's more to do compared to the little general aviation aircraft. There we go. So it overshot the turn slightly on the autopilot, probably because I was 20 knots over speed on the climb out. And it's just intersecting the flight plan to bring it back online. Okay, so turn the taxi lights off. Logo is on. Wing lights are off. We're looking good. So now there's D358C that I was talking about. Once we go through D358C, we can start climbing to our eventual target height. So we can put the height in before we need to climb, because we're in altitude hold, so it will take no notice of the altitude we're dialing in. So we're going to go for 18,000 feet, and it literally is going to be straight up and straight down again. There's our 18,000 feet. So when we get to the marker, we're going to change the vertical speed to climb, and we'll let the automatic throttle take care of keeping us at 250 knots. So yeah, I prefer flying these big jets because there's more to do. There's more to fiddle with along the way. There's rules in the real world about, you know, the route and everything, but we've just made a route up. We're not taking any account of the course here either. I think our actual trek across the country is going to be about 330 degrees. We will dial it in for the ILS when we get to the other end. So we'll have a look. We're landing on runway 23 right at Manchester. So we're coming through this waypoint. After this is the end of the standard instrument departure. We can begin climbing to altitude. So let's put in the rates of climb we want. So we'll go for 3,000 feet a minute, which is a pretty steep climb, and you can see it's struggling to hold it, but you can also see the engines are coming up to meet the request. So they're coming up to 80%, and it's accelerating towards 250 knots again. So we're managing to hold it at 80%. So we could probably go a little bit steeper. Over 4,000 feet a minute. I mean, normally you wouldn't manoeuvre this hard. You'd only be looking for a couple of thousand feet a minute. Because you can see, yeah, look, it's really started to push the engines. We're up to 84%. The gas turbines are running at 95%. It really is going some, basically. We're up to 6,000 feet already. Have a look out the window, you can see, look, we're climbing out. See the towns and cities disappearing below us. In the early evening light. We're on our way. So I believe we left the fasten seatbelts on automatic. So we don't need to worry too much about that. Coming up through 9,000 feet. So if we zoom out on this map, we get some idea of the shape of the route. So we've got top of descent. It's not very far away from us, look. It's only 60 miles away. So we're showing 80 miles on this display. Let's zoom in slightly so we can see. We can show waypoints on the map, and they'll be drawn in. I'm surprised it's not showing anything for the terrain radar. It's kind of surprising. It's not that flat around here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the seatbelt sign is still on, and please remain seated. When the captain does turn off the sign, feel free to stand up and stretch your legs at that time. However, we do ask while you're in your seat, please keep your seatbelt.
This is such a short flight. The passengers are only going to get a few minutes to stretch their legs. I feel kind of sorry for them. So we can show airports along the way that we're passing by.
We'll be serving a variety of complimentary drinks as well as select beer and wine. In addition, there are other alcoholic beverages for purchase. And we'd like you to sit back, relax, and enjoy our service on tonight's flight. If there's anything we can do to make them enjoyable, please don't hesitate to call upon us. Thank you.
So we'll actually start our descent before it advises us to. So we've gone through we could actually request it to speed up. Let's see if it can accelerate at this rate of climb. Probably not. Yeah, it's only just managing to hold 250 knots. So we will therefore drop our rate of climb and do, in fact, I think they call it a step climb,
1,000 to go.
where we're not going to continue it climbing at such a rate, which will give us the chance to accelerate. You can see the speed's coming up. So we're accelerating to 300 knots. We're just about to come to 18,000 feet. That's 300 knots indicated. Now you can see over here, look, we've got ground speed versus indicated. So this is the indicated airspeed. So the probe outside that is measuring the airspeed, that will differ tremendously depending on your altitude from the actual ground speed. You can also see the wind indicated, even at 18,000 feet. Look, there's a 76 knot wind, side wind, and we're about to turn almost into it. So our ground speed will drop off. Yeah, we're making the turn now, look. You can see the ground speed coming down, 349. 348. At the same time we're accelerating through the air. So there's this combination of us being at high altitude, so the indicated airspeed is showing less than the ground speed, but also we're going into the wind quite significantly, which is offsetting that slightly. So it can get quite complicated if you're trying to work it out. Okay, so the other thing we haven't done is set the barometric pressure to standard. Let's see if we can get the data on the destination airport. So while we're en route, we'll go into Avitab, go to airport, and we'll go and look up EGCC, search for EGCC. Now, can we see the weather? No weather. Usually you can get weather information. It's a bit odd that you can't. Interesting. So what we're going to do while it's running is open little nav map, and we'll get rid of these reminders that Microsoft is helpfully jamming in our face, and we will find out where our aircraft is on the route, and we'll kill that while it's at it. Well, this has had a real nightmare, hasn't it, with rendering things. Oh, it's an old flight plan. That's why. Okay. So, what we're interested in looking at is at Manchester International Airport. If we show information for it. Pressure 29.83. Yeah, that's what we need to know about. We also need to know about the ILS. So we've got 29.83, I'm just going to write that down, 29.83, and ILS is 109.5232 degrees, 109.5. This button recenters your aircraft on the map, which is really not helpful. 232 degrees. Okay, I've just written that down. We go back to the simulator. And we can get that programmed in before we get anywhere near descent and deceleration. So, down here we've got the nav radios. So we need to program in 109.5 for the ILS. So the outer knob is the decimals, inner knob is, sorry, outer knob is the integers, inner knob is the decimals. switch that over. We'll do the same for the co-pilot, so 109.5, switch it over. We want to set the course up here to be 232, which will be the direction of the runway. We'll do the same for the co-pilots. Okay. So we're about 30 miles from top of descent. I'll come down early because obviously while I'm talking, doing things, I want to do things a little bit ahead of time so I get time to actually talk instead of suddenly go silent and have to concentrate and get things done. So we've got a few minutes yet before we need to worry about doing anything. Did I say earlier I could maybe let people go to the toilet? So, oops. Oh, these switches are not being helpful. Fasten seatbelts off. So we give people 5 minutes to go to the toilet. PA system, captain level off. So we can hear what that sounds like.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen from the flight deck. We've reached our cruising altitude. Looks like we are anticipating on-time arrival. You're going to head and turn off the seatbelts at this time. Just remember, if you are in your seats, keep your seatbelts fastened in case we do experience any unexpected turbulence.
Unfortunately for those passengers, we're going to turn it back on in a couple of minutes. Okay. Now, would that be Manchester we can see out ahead of us, or is that a different one? I think that's a different one. I think Manchester's probably over there. If we turn on the airports here, we can figure it out. So it's probably this one, EGNX. We're about to fly over the top of. We'll turn the airports back off, because we're not interested. There goes the terrain. I thought there should have been some. Maybe it's just so billiard ball flat down towards London that it just doesn't show anything up on the terrain radar. I mean, we're not going to need to worry about it anyway. It's not that hilly around here. Okay. So coming up to top of descent, it's inside 20 miles from us. So I'm going to shorten the range on this to 40 miles. So we're about 15 miles from top of descent. I'm going to start descending, so we've not got any big hurry going on. So let's immediately go for, again, if you're in communication with air traffic control, they're going to tell you, they're going to give you vectors and tell you what height they want you to go to initially. So we will initially go, we'll go straight down to 5,000 feet. And we'll do it at 2,500 feet a minute. Now let's see if we can manage that. So the throttles are coming back, so we will appear to accelerate to begin with. We'll also go back for 250 knots. We need to hit 250 knots before we get to 10,000 feet. Which is probably not going to happen. So we can either manage that by using the air brake, or we can lessen our rate of descent. You have to remember this is a 70-ton aeroplane, probably more than that with fuel and passengers, and it's very slippery through the air. So even without the engines on, it's going to glide very fast, and we won't slow it down purely by turning the engines off. So if we were to come back to 2,000 feet, for example, per minute, We're down to 15,000 feet already. Now, according to the flight plan, we are supposed to arrive into the standard instrument approach, or standard approach route. Well, actually, sorry, no, we're not using a standard approach route, we're just going for ILS. But by the time we come out of Bolby, we want to be at 3,000 feet, ideally. So we're going for 5,000 to begin with. Let's turn some of this clutter off. So the speed is coming off. I think we'll probably be fine, actually, because we've got all this leg along here to slow down as well. But if it does become an issue, so if I zoom out slightly, it's a bit cluttered up on that display to see this. Obviously I'm doing this without a flight plan sat in my lap, so typically you'd have a printout of it to look at. So we want to be 3,000 feet by Bolby, ideally. We're saying 3,500, I think, on the approach. So that shouldn't be too difficult for us to achieve. Have a look outside while we're doing this. Various cities out there. Towns. It's quite cloudy, isn't it? So we're going to tell everybody we're descending, and we're going to put the seatbelt signs back on.
Still showing well ahead of schedule. Thanks again. Hope you have a nice week. Have you on the camera here very shortly.
Gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. Please recheck the security of your seatbelt.
Hopefully this will be a very drama-free flight. So we're just basically descending down to 8,000 feet now. Interestingly, we're not losing too much more speed. So we're going a little bit fast because we're below 10,000 feet. So I am going to pull the air brakes and get rid of that last bit of speed. So back to 250 knots. So we're going a little bit fast as we came through 10,000 feet. I'm not going to worry too much about that. This is only a demonstration flight. So again, we'll pull that back to 1500. Remove the air brakes. We'll come around this turn. We can carry on the descent down to 3,500 it wanted us at, didn't it? For around here, yeah. It's all looking very good. About 25 miles from Bolby, doing 250 knots. As soon as we come past Bolby, we'll start getting rid of the speed and start thinking about, once we turn around this final corner towards final approach, we will start dropping flaps and undercarriage. Got far too much fuel on board. Enough to do a circuit of probably do the same route all over again. So we're coming down to 3. So yeah, we don't need to come down anywhere near this fast. So we're going to go to 1,000 feet a minute now. We're almost down to 3,500 feet already. So we started the descent early. It's not a problem. So you can see some cars on the roads down there. Should we turn on the terrain radar?
2,500.
So again, oh, we didn't set the 29.83, so that should have been set when we came down through. It's a good job I did look, because it's making us slightly lower than we thought, which is good. So that makes sense why they want us at 3,500 feet. That puts us at 2,500 above ground level going into the ILS feathers. That makes total sense all of a sudden. I don't think I've actually flown into Manchester before. I know VATSIM do a lot of their training for air traffic controllers at Manchester. So let's zoom this in again, so we start to get more information. Yeah, so it wants us at 3,500 feet onto the beginning, so that's really 2,500 above ground level, because we've now got the radar altitude is popping up now and again. So although we're showing, it's interesting that it's not, it's doing altitude hold, I guess, because that's where we got to. If we do tell it to climb back to 3,500 feet, yeah, it's just gently doing it, really slowly. I've told it to go up 100 feet a minute. If I tell it to go 500 feet a minute, so we're back at 3,500, 2,450, yeah. We're obviously, there's an incline below us on the ground, so you're going to see the radar altimeter move around. Obviously there's a hill coming as well, you can see on the terrain radar, so that number's going to reduce. It's dipping at the moment, but as soon as we get nearer to there, you'll see this number come up. Obviously we're plenty of height there. I imagine that's the airport over there. You can see it in the distance. So yeah, we came down early, but that's fine. It gives us time to think, time to talk, time to explain things. And it's raining. Wonderful. So we'll turn the windscreen wipers on into interval. I hope it's not snow. I think it's just rain. You can get very whizzy plug-ins to do rain that bleeds across the aircraft. We've got the window heaters on, so we're fine. Don't think we need anti-ice switched on. and the rain has gone away anyway, so we're going to repark the wipers. How are we doing on the flight plan? So we're coming up towards the turn. Just double check, we have already put the 109.5 into the nav radios. We have put the course to 232, which is the direction of the runway. For runway 23 right at Manchester. So we're getting there. So we can now play games with leaving that display showing quite a close view of this turn. We're going to switch this side to show the approach. So we can now see the ILS superimposed, so you can see the glide slope markers. You can also see the glide slope markers here. So this is showing the bearing of the runway, or the course that we've programmed. You can see there's a 26 knot wind. So you can see we're still flying along, which is why there's these offsets, you can see. And here comes the rain again, so we'll re-engage the wipers so we can see where we're going. So we're going to start slowing down. Down to 200 knots. And we can see the last turn here. I think the rain stopped again, so we'll turn the wipers back off. How are we doing? Speed's coming off. So I'm going to start winding the flaps out. And here comes some more of the rain. Great. Okay, so I'll put the wipers back on. I'll leave them on. It's going to be that unpredictable on the way in. So we've got flaps to 2 already. Now flaps to 5. We're going to go to 180 knots. Gear down. And we're going to engage approach mode. So the plane is now going to fly itself down the glide slope for us. It's important that you engage approach mode before you reach the glide slope, because you can't engage it from above the glide slope. Yeah, so you can see the diamond coming down. The filled diamonds means we are engaged on the glide slope. You can see the runway out there in the distance, and we're on our way in. So we can start winding the speed off now and putting the flaps out. So we'll come in 140 knots, full flaps, gears down, 3 greens, looking good. Approach mode is activated, put this to approach as well. You can see the runway out there. When we get closer to the runway, we will disengage the autopilot. I mean, we could let it auto land, but that's no fun, is it? We'll disengage the autopilot, so we're going to turn the landing lights on now.
2500.
Again, while you're doing this, you would also be having a conversation with air traffic control, so you'd be passing from approach over to the tower about as soon as you've got, as soon as you're engaged on the localizer. Sorry. It might be worth actually one evening I'll set this up and I'll have my middle daughter has been learning to do air traffic control. It'd be interesting for me to do the conversation with her, just as an example of the kind of conversation you have with it with air traffic control. I'm going to turn the wipers back off. Don't need them. So let's center the view up. So I'm going to come off of the auto throttle. In preparation for me taking... I just like landing manually, it's more fun. Whoa! And there was some turbulence. We've got a warning that the auto throttle has been switched off. Yes, I did it, it's fine. So I've just balanced the throttle to make sure we're not accelerating or decelerating. We're holding about 140 knots on the way in. So we're letting the plane fly itself in, basically. This would be interesting, actually. Can we engage both autopilots on a Boeing? Should we try it? Yes, we can. And that's switched over to... It's still only single channel though. You would expect it to go dual channel. But it's engaged flare mode. Okay, we'll let it auto land. It thinks it's going to. So we'll leave the auto throttle on then. And let it do what it wants. This will be interesting. Let's watch the...
feet stabilized, Mr. Bridge, altitude 7.
Let's watch the auto land. Should be good fun. So we're putting our life in the hands of the aircraft to bring us down in one piece. So we can see out the window various roads of Manchester whizzing past. Center it up just in case I do need to do anything. I've already turned the landing lights on. We're at full flaps, gear is down.
500.
We're looking good. So you see the trees being illuminated by the landing lights just over the nose.
200.
Let's see how it flares. Wonder how well it does it. Comes the runway apron.
100.
So I'm not touching anything.
50. 40. 30.
And up
20,
comes the nose.
10.
Retard. So auto throttle has come off on its own. So I will engage thrust reversers.
80 knots.
And we can gently steer off the runway. And flaps up.
We'll be taxiing to the gate for the next few minutes. Would you please remain seated with your seatbelt securely fastened?
Well, that was entirely without incident, wasn't it?
Captain turns off the fasten seatbelt sign. At that time,
Gently slow down.
personal belongings you brought on board as used today, and use caution when opening the overhead compartment. Thank you for flying with us today. We hope you had a pleasant experience, so we look forward to serving you again. Thank you, and have a pleasant afternoon.
I have no idea where I'm going. I haven't looked at a chart at all. I know the terminals are all down this way, so we may as well just carry on and go and find the terminal. Obviously you would be given directions, and you would normally have a chart of the airfield to refer to, and you would be given specific taxiway instructions. I have none of that, so I'm just following a line that I know is in the general direction of the terminals. So we'll go down. So something we do need to do along the way, which I'll do now, is turn these lights off and turn the taxi lights on. Otherwise we end up blinding everybody. Landing lights are incredibly powerful.